What's up, everybody? Matt Maran here for another weekly update. And first, I hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving. We have a few less stories than normal this week because of the holiday week, of course. But there's all kinds of interesting stuff here. The first is Jaguar. So, not official news here, but there was a report in Autocar this week that's talking about the likelihood of an electric F-Type for the next-gen version. And there's been rumors about this in the past, but it now seems a little more founded because there's a little more specifics, and they were talking with Jaguar's designer Ian Callum, and they were talking about stuff. And so basically what this Autocar report is claiming is that there's a strong likelihood the next-gen F-Type will be an EV only, not as an option or not like partially hybridized or something, just completely EV like the I-Pace. So there's also, now that it's not confirmed, supposedly are locked in yet, they said they're still also considering using BMW's 4.4 liter twin-turbo V8, since supposedly that's the V8 engine they're going to be using in new Land Rover products going forward, the ones that, need to have a V8 engine. And apparently Land Rover can't continue using their current V8s for some reason, maybe for efficiency or whatever, but they also can't afford to develop their own V8 engine, so they're saying they would be partnering up with BMW for this. But in the Autocar report, they said that Jaguar was kind of hesitant to use that BMW engine in the F-Type, mostly because they say that it would limit the designer's flexibility and creativity in regards to how they would style the next F-Type. They said they could make it more expressive and more like the E-Type with bold styling from back in the day. If you had those electric motors, obviously much lower, and the battery is all on the floor, it gives you a lot more space to play around with design and stuff, much like the I-Pace, which has a very unconventional front end there compared with traditional gasoline engine vehicles. And so that's kind of their reasoning, and of course the performance would be great. I mean, even the I-Pace, it's pretty quick, and so this F-Type with that, even in the slowest configuration, would still be pretty quick. And they said they could, of course, put more powerful electric motors in, have it on both the front and the rear axles and all that type of stuff to make it either rear-wheel drive or all-wheel drive. And so similar to like the new Tesla with the Model 3 and stuff, a similar type of idea as far as how they would package it and offer different levels and stuff. But there's other things to kind of fuel the idea that this is what's actually going to happen as an EV F-Type. As much as I love the gasoline engine versions, I'm inclined to believe this EV version is what's going to be coming next, because I-Pace sales, for one, have been doing very, very well, and Jaguar sales in general, though, haven't been great, and apparently their parent company isn't happy with the lower Jaguar sales, and so they're considering doing a completely new take on all the models and making everything electrified. I talked about that a few weeks ago, and it's sounding like they're more and more heavily considering that option of just becoming like a Tesla fighter and having everything be EV by, I think, like 2025 was the rumored number. So to continue on with the reasoning for why the F-Type could be EV, it's also sounding like the XJ replacement is going to be an all EV model. That's coming first in 2020. The new F-Type isn't supposed to come till 2021 anyway, so there's still a little bit of time for them to decide and figure this out, I guess. But it sounds like that's the way they're going. If they're going to have the whole Jaguar brand, be EV anyway by 2025, the F-Type has a longer lifespan than the other models because it's a sports vehicle, so it doesn't sell as much, so they can't afford to keep updating it as frequently as the normal models. So if you want to future-proof this, then you design it so that it's going to last for 7 or 8 years, then that would overlap that 2025 number. And so even if they didn't build it originally with an EV powertrain, they'd have to build in that packaging availability for down the road. And then if you're going to do that and make it EV eventually anyway, then what's the point of not doing it from the get-go? Make it futuristic, make it a halo model, and just go for that. The unfortunate thing with that, though, is it'd be much more expensive, I think. You look at an I-Pace compared with a similar like E-Pace or even F-Pace SUV, and the I-Pace is more expensive. So I mean, I would guess that an F-Type in its base trim would probably be about 20 grand more than it is currently, and so that would be unfortunate as well, to kind of make it a little more out of the reach of people to be able to afford it. But anyway, we'll have to wait and see what happens. Just a report, still nothing confirmed. But I'm willing to bet this is probably what's going to happen, which means F-Types might become pretty good investments here, the current generation, if you're going to get rid of that glorious sound, which is probably the best part of the F-Type currently. We'll have to wait and see what they end up doing. But going further on into this electrified news here, British Columbia actually announced this week that they're going to be they're introducing legislation to ban the sale of new gas and diesel powered vehicles starting in 2040. That's similar to, Paris, London, you know, they all have these 2040 bans on gas engines as their goal. And so we'll see what happens with that. And again, that would be the sale of new gas engines. So used sales are good. Anything you currently own, even in 2040, you could still be able to drive. And under the current, you know, proposed idea. But again, they're just introducing legislation in British Columbia. They haven't, you know, finalized it or made it the actual law yet. So we'll have to see. But it's just, this is the way everything's going. And another story about this, Volkswagen has been seeing all this stuff. And of course, they've been making a big EV push ever since Dieselgate. But now there's a story that came out this past week saying that they have agreements in place with battery manufacturers to give them the ability to build up to 15 million EVs over the next several years. They didn't say exactly when, but it would be starting in 2020 and going on till whenever. But they are planning by 2025 to have 50 EV models. So, I mean, that kind of would, like, for example, be like the Jetta wagon. There could be, you know, ways to amplify that to a number of 50. But still, that's all. Basically, they want to make everything EV, it sounds like. And following up with that, in other Volkswagen news, there was trademarks found by AutoGuide last week, showing that Volkswagen has filed trademarks for ID1 all the way through ID9. And so that could be the numbering. Although I wish they would use actual names instead of just making them sound like printer, you know, models or something. It's just like, try and use something a little more creative than just ID and then the number. Even though that's popular with German brands, it's still just, hopefully they don't. And hopefully they have recognized that and are actually developing other real names, because Volkswagen this past week also trademarked Ellie with this logo you see there. And it looks like a digitized lightning bolt, although it could just be some other kind of blob, because there's two different trains of thought. This could be put on some type of vehicle, electric vehicle most likely, or it could actually be, AutoGuide is suggesting this idea that it could be like their new personal assistant, like Siri, Amazon Alexa. Theirs could be called Ellie. And they did show off a personal assistant type thing in the ID Vision concept that they showed, you know, earlier this year. And so could be something like that too for what this is. Not sure. The trademark wasn't very specific. It was very broad, in fact. So we'll have to wait and see. But that would be nice if they put that name on an actual vehicle and didn't just give it a serial number instead. Other electric stuff from the Volkswagen Group is Audi is bringing the E-Tron GT concept to the LA Auto Show next week. And they showed this teaser image of it, which looks very cool so far. But we'll have to wait to see more next week. But getting back to actual production vehicles, another vehicle that's going to be shown at the LA Auto Show, but was shown early, is Subaru has revealed pictures and details on the 2019 Crosstrek Hybrid. And although the name only says hybrid, it's actually a plug-in hybrid. And so for this plug-in hybrid, it has an EV range of only 17 miles, which is actually less than the competition. Now, you do get all-wheel drive, which most of those don't offer. But still, 17 miles is a little disappointing, I think. It still uses the same 2-liter direct-injected flat-4 engine as the regular Crosstrek, but it actually makes 4 less horsepower now than a regular Crosstrek, at 148 horsepower combined between the electric and gas motor. So I don't know if the electric motor is not really providing a lot, or if the gas motor has been detuned a lot, or why it would make actually less power when you have an additional motor helping you out. But Subaru does claim it's 1 second faster 0 to 60 than a regular Crosstrek, but even on a good day, that would still only put it at about an 8.2 second 0 to 60 time, so still not quick by any means. It's also 3,726 pounds listed for the curb weight, which makes it about 500 pounds heavier than a regular Crosstrek, and so that's because it has an 8.8 kilowatt hour battery pack. So you have this big, heavy battery pack, but it only gives you 17 miles of range. So it's I don't know. I'm just gonna keep on reading the numbers here because it kind of gets worse and worse as I read more here. So it takes 5 hours to charge on a 120 volt power outlet, which is pretty standard. 2 hours on a 240 volt outlet. But unlike the regular one, it's also only available with the CVT transmission. Of course, you can't get a manual like you can in the regular Crosstrek, which makes that a little more fun than it usually would be, even despite the fact it doesn't have much power. But then here's the kicker. It's $7,800 more expensive than a regular Crosstrek Limited. So that's the fully loaded top-of-the-line Crosstrek. You add an extra $7,800 on top of that to get the starting price of $34,995 plus destination, which is $975. So in reality, you basically are starting out at 36 grand for a Crosstrek plug-in hybrid here. And then that doesn't even come with a moonroof or heated steering wheel, so it's still not fully loaded. If you want the moonroof, heated steering wheel, navigation, or the Harman Kardon stereo, that's all bundled in a package that's $2,500 extra. So at the end of the day, you're looking at like $38.5 for a fully loaded Crosstrek hybrid, which is steep for a Crosstrek. Again, the smallest little Subaru crossover, nearly 40 grand is steep, and you only get 17 miles of EV range. And it's not really any powerful or anything. I'm not sure how that's gonna sell. We'll have to wait and see. I mean, of course, you're gonna have the diehards that have very short commutes that will love the 17 miles of range and being able to have a Subaru with all-wheel drive and not have any emissions. For everyone else, if you actually are serious about it, there's much better plug-in hybrids with higher range, or you can just go for something full EV. You can get 35 grand. You can get a fully loaded Nissan Leaf and have 125 miles of range if you don't drive very far. And don't even have to bother with a gas engine at all. So anyway, interesting to hear that. Toyota this past week has revealed all the details for the TRD versions of the Camry and Avalon. What times we're living in. There's a TRD version of the Camry and Avalon. Basically, both models, the Camry and the Avalon, get similar changes, although the Camry does get its own rear spoiler there on the back, which is, again, crazy to see on a Camry, that the Avalon does not. The Avalon sticks with a more subtle lip spoiler there on the trunk. But they both get these aero kits with these red accents. They get red painted brake calipers and TRD badges as far as exterior stuff goes. Performance-wise, they get TRD catback exhausts, thicker underbody bracing with, I think, anti-roll bars are stiffer for more torsional rigidity. You get TRD shocks and the springs actually lower the ride height by 0.6 inches, and you get 0.9-inch larger front brake rotors and 2 piston calipers instead of the 1 pistons you usually get on Camrys. They also get 19-inch wheels that are 3 pounds lighter at each for each one, and they're on Bridgestone Potenza summer tires now. They do still use the same engine and transmission, though, and that catback exhaust doesn't seem to give it any extra horsepower because the horsepower listings are the exact same as the non-TRD versions. Inside, you get some TRD badges in various places. You get red stitching and even red seat belts. And so anyway, these are 2020 model year vehicles, so they're going to be on sale in the fall of 2019. So we still are about a year away from actually seeing these in dealerships. But anyway, very interesting to see that, and I'll be curious to hear your comments on it. Mini has shown a special edition here of the Cooper they're going to be showing in LA, and it's the 2019 John Cooper Works Nights Edition. And it starts with a regular Works version, John Cooper Works, and blacks out a lot of the trim, make it a little more aggressive looking. The rest of the trim's either in silver or red. You can see the accents there. Performance-wise, the only change is it includes the remote-controlled exhaust system with a little flap there to make it louder, which is cool. And they're going to be on sale in the first quarter of next year. They didn't give any pricing or anything, but I'm sure it's, the Cooper Works versions are pretty pricey as it is, so this is just going to make it even more so. They also announced that there's going to be a new GP version of the Cooper coming in 2020. So that was always like the top highest performing version right before the new version came out, kind of as a final hurrah. And so 2020 is when that version is coming. They showed a concept last year of that, and that might give us some hints, although that was very extreme and aggressive and radical looking. So I'm not sure how much of that could make it to production, but I'm sure certain elements from that you'll certainly see, or that'll be used for inspiration at least. But anyway, interesting to hear that as well. Kia has shown some teaser images here of the 2020 Soul that'll be shown next week in LA. So slowly, little by little, they're revealing more and more of it. First, we see the side profile here, which reveals these stormtrooper-looking headlamps, which from spy photos seem like they're going to go the entire width of the front bumper there, or the front end, which should be pretty cool and very Star Wars looking. There's other small details like the body line starting at the fender there, kind of a little scoop indentation that kind of moves on towards the back there. They also showed off the door handle for some reason, and the widescreen infotainment system, which does look very nice actually, and I think this is the first time that Kia has actually used any type of new infotainment widescreen display. Usually it's the same typical UVO infotainment system they have in everything. So that's pretty cool. They also showed the steering wheel controls again for some reason, and also showing you the ability to have two-tone there for the roof, which is cool. And so anyway, we'll have to wait to see more of that next week. Mercedes has also shown a teaser for the AMG GT R Pro, which I guess is the new naming convention they're going to be using for the higher version of the AMG GT R here. Previously they had like the AMG Black series, and so I guess they're switching over to the Pro designation instead. So that looks very aggressive and very promising. We'll have to wait to hear more details, of course, at LA. They also said that there's going to be refreshed versions of the two-door AMG GT. The whole lineup will be at LA as well. And last week, I believe, is when the version with quad exhaust tips was spied, suggesting there's going to be a GT 53 version, which will be like the hybrid 48 volt system like you see in the other AMG GT 53 models, for the other versions of various vehicles. The CLS has it and a few others. So there's most likely going to be that version as well that will be debuting. Lamborghini has also shown two new vehicles here. The first is the SC18 Alston, which is this one-off built for a customer that's obviously very wealthy. It's based on the Aventador SVJ, but it's mechanically unchanged. It's mostly just trying to give it more aggressive aerodynamics and stuff. This new appearance borrows some elements there on the back from the Centenario as well. Other stuff's just influenced from the Lamborghini GT3 vehicles, like the Huracan GT3 and Evo models, and it's also got some lighter carbon fiber bodywork as well, they said, so I'm guessing it handles and probably performs a little bit better, although there weren't any numbers given, because of course this is just one person's car that they paid Lamborghini to build, and that's it. And anyway, cool to see that at least. One vehicle that will be available to at least a few more people is the Lamborghini Urus STX, which is a non-street legal version of the Urus. It stands for Super Trofeo Cross, or X, and it's going to be racing in a new Super Trofeo series that they say is going to be on mixed terrain. So I'm guessing there's some gravel or some type of off-road component to it. And that series will be starting in 2020, which is, I guess, when they'll start making these available, or early 2019, for I think they said they're going to show it at a few other things beforehand in 2019. But anyway, the engine's unchanged from a regular Urus, but it has a ton of racing stuff added, including, roll cage, fuel cell, racing fuel cell, and a fire suppression system. They also opened up the front grille for better cooling, you can see, just mesh now, then added a rear spoiler, rear diffuser, and center lock wheels. The exhaust now comes out in front of the rear wheels as well, which is a cool little touch. Also, much of the interior has been stripped out, so much so that they're saying that this is actually 25% lighter than a regular Urus, which is a huge number, 25% lighter. So, I mean, the Urus is currently about 4,800 pounds. So if we do the math, that would be about 1,200 pounds lighter, and make it only 3,600 pounds for this SUV in this racing form. Again, there's probably no back seat, no real interior stuff. It's probably completely stripped for the most part. Anyway, that should be a pretty cool racing series too, sounds like, having some on-road and off-road components mixed in. And so sounds pretty cool to me. Other Lamborghini news is the CEO sat down with Automotive News for an interview recently, and they were talking about, future vehicles, and the CEO did confirm that the next V12 and V10 supercars will definitely have a plug-in hybrid component to them, which we already kind of knew and were hearing, but now to actually get it confirmed from the CEO is pretty big. So whatever the next Huracan and Aventador are called, they will all be plug-in hybrid. Now, it's nice. They're saying they're not going to do turbocharging or any kind of EV stuff. It's just some type of battery range, for in those cities and stuff that eventually ban the gas engine, but they will still have those glorious sounding engines that are naturally aspirated to do their own thing and continue on with the huge power numbers, which is great. Anyway, in the interview, they also talked about Lamborghini's plans to add a fourth model line, and Automotive News actually asked if it's going to be a successor to the Espada, which was, from the 70s, and kind of like a GTC4 Lusso type thing, and they were saying, the CEO didn't, confirm it or anything. Of course, they would never confirm it, even if it was what they were actually doing, but they did suggest that the interior space of the vehicle would be important. And they want to have something, I think it sounds like a little more practical, obviously, than the Huracan and Aventador, but not, a full-on SUV like the Urus. And so we do have some hints. Lamborghini back in 2014 did show off the Asterion, I think is how you pronounce it, which was also a plug-in hybrid, by the way, combined with a V12 in the back, but it had rear seats, and, kind of like an RX-8 style rear door there, it seems. And so that was, cool, but again, that was 4 years ago at this point, or over 4 years ago. and hasn't been anything since. And it sounds like it's still a far ways off, because the CEO said whatever is coming, it wouldn't come any earlier than 2025. So, I mean, we still have 6 years. It's like a full generation of future Lamborghinis before you see this, which is kind of weird. You'd think, with this concept in 2014, they would have wanted to push something out a little faster, but, maybe they're taking 10 years to do it. I don't know. But anyway, interesting to hear that nonetheless. And this past week, 2 images leaked out of the 2020 Buick LaCrosse on this Chinese government website, and it was found by Auto Verdict. And so it looks, very similar to current brand new Buicks. It's most likely going to get the same types of changes here in the States as well. This is obviously for the Chinese market. That's why it's going through this government Chinese site. But anyway, sounds and looks pretty good, from what we can see there. I'm not sure what they would do mechanically. I'm sure it would just be pretty similar to the current version, since it's just a refresh. But I think that actually looks really, really, really good. I've always liked Buick's new designs, and their styling direction has always been pretty sharp to me. So I think that's a really nice change. Not sure when we'll see the American version officially. Could be the Detroit Auto Show in January. Could be later. We'll have to see. But anyway, interesting to see those little glimpses there. Another vehicle that got leaked out this past week was the 2020 Genesis G90 that leaked out on this Korean forum. So this is obviously the Korean version. And we do know that Korea is getting a new G90 in June of next year is when it's supposed to go on sale. But as far as when we get this is, yet to be determined. I'm sure it'll be much later. But it looks pretty good, I have to say. It was just teased last week. And so, this definitely lines up with the teaser. So this is definitely legit. In the back end is the only thing that looks a little controversial. It's just interesting having the chrome around the long taillights there in the back. It kind of reminds me a little bit of like a Lincoln from the 90s. But in a good way. I actually really like the way that looks in the back. So I don't know if it's just me being sentimental or if, it just looks good. I don't know. But anyway, interesting to see that little glimpse. And again, we'll have to wait to see when that finally debuts. Also, Mercedes was spied this week testing the GLB 35. And thanks to my spy photographer, Brian Williams, for providing these pictures. And so, it still is pretty similar to what we've seen on the GLB in the past. Although this time it does, at least in these pictures, seem like it gives it a little bit of a smaller look. It's previously was reported it could have a third row and be a little bit bigger, but this actually seems to be kind of like GLC sized, just a little boxier, kind of more reminiscent of the GLKs. A little more stretched out than a GLK, but a similar type of boxy look to it. And the 35 version means it's probably going to use all the same powertrains as you get in the A-Class and the CLA and the GLA, and whenever those new versions come here next year. And so this is, I guess, on track to probably also make a debut next year and just be a little bit roomier for those that, think the GLA is a little cramped, but still don't need, the bigger engines and the traditional automatic like you get in the GLC. This will have the dual clutch and the 4 cylinders that are a little bit smaller. But anyway, interesting to see that, and it's nice to see that we have a 35 version with, should have a roughly 300 horsepower, and there should be a, close to 400 horsepower 45 version as well. But anyway, cool to see that. The last story this week here is Mazda has announced finally officially their retrofitting option for Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and it's going to be available for anyone with a 2014 or newer Mazda with the Mazda Connect infotainment system. So if you have that system, you can get this upgrade, but unfortunately it requires new, faster, and more powerful USB ports, as well as a software reflash. And so that hardware change is, I think, what mostly is the most expensive thing, because this costs $199 plus labor. And they said it should take about 2 hours. So whatever 2 hours of labor is at a Mazda dealer, that plus the $199. So that's a little bit of a bummer, since a lot of other companies, I think, are offering it for free. Now, Ford, for example, they didn't officially announce a package, but like in my Mustang, for example, I bought the USB jacks for my 2016 Mustang GT, last year. The USB jacks were, I think, like $54, and it was pretty easy to swap in and out myself, and I just did the software update on a USB stick. I'm not sure if there's a workaround from Mazda, if you have to do this at a dealer or what, but there could be a workaround if it's not too hard to swap those USB jacks in the Mazdas, depending on what model you have. But this is good because, like, for example, the 2019 Miata that I just had as a press vehicle recently and we'll be posting a review of here next week, that didn't have CarPlay as standard, but I guess you can pay $200 extra and now have CarPlay in the Miata, which is, great. It's awesome that they're offering the functionality. It's just a little bit of a bummer. It costs $200. But anyway, interesting to see that. But that's it for all the news this week, guys. So let me know your thoughts and everything in the comments below. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next week. Take care.